What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to a Wednesday edition of Back Your Play with Q. I'm your host, as always, Rich Quinones. Check us out on the YouTube channel at Rich Q on Q. Follow us across all the platforms. Of course, Leon Media Network, HSRN, 1029 The Game in Tampa, part of Broad Street South. And look who we got, our guy, the grinder, the hustler, excellent writer, and now adding something else to not only covering the Philadelphia Eagles, but also the Baltimore Ravens. Glenn Erby, managing editor of the Eagles Wire and the Ravens Wire. Give him a follow. Excellent follow on social media, on Twitter at the THA, the cover two NFL. What's going on, brother? Happy football season.
Same, Rich. Happy Wednesday, man. Blessed to be back on. Glad to be talking to you. How's it going?
Everything is going well. I mean, I'm not sure my Giants showed up the other night. We'll get to those.
Yeah,
Those a
definitely.
bunch of dogs in a couple moments. But all right, let's start. Philadelphia Eagles. A win is a win in the NFL. We know that it doesn't have to be pretty. It can be sloppy. I think I underestimated and undervalued New England's defense, and I thought Mac Jones was going to be one of those quarterbacks. I had him. BYP had him on one of those quarterbacks that are going to be under the microscope, and they hung around. You get the late Hurts's turnover, and they had a chance to win that game. But the Eagles do what they do. They figure out a way to win the game. I want to ask you, first and foremost, going through that game, a little surprised when you talk about the rushing attack. This team has really been a very good ground team over the last several years, whether it's running back committee or not. But the fact that Gainwell, Swift, Penny, you make the move for him, and here's a guy that wasn't even dressed, wasn't even active. Talk a little bit about what you saw from the rushing attack, or their lack of, against New England, and how they can kind of remedy that and fix it going forward.
Well, I think, like you said, it's just one game, and we have to remember that the play caller from the previous 2 years is now in Indianapolis as a head coach. So,
Yep.
Shane Steichen, he had his clunkers, he had his bad games. I don't necessarily know if it was his first game calling
Right.
the offense, and I think that's the problem. But I think it's a situation where it's Brian Johnson's a first-year coordinator. That was his first game. Nick Sirianni is giving him the opportunity as a play caller to work things out, and so I think that's what you're seeing happening. So I think, they're predominantly passing team anyway, regardless of the fact that they lead the NFL in rushing. So I'm not sure, even with Rashad Penny active, that you're necessarily going to have all three or four guys log 10 to 15 carries. So I think from that standpoint, it's a bit overblown. I think you definitely have to give DeAndre Swift more than 19 total plays and
Yep.
2 touches. So I think from that standpoint, that needs to be fixed, and I think it will with Gainwell likely out. But from the standpoint of the first game, and just trying to see what works and what doesn't in the monsoon and in the rain, they did all right, and they'll figure it out.
It's a pretty astute point that you bring up, and we fail to remember too, right? Or we remember, but we're not patient when you switch coordinators. I mean, I thought, again, you got a new OC and a new DC, and I think it takes time to kind of get on the same page. With that being said, you get the sense that Sirianni, who's a really intelligent football mind, and got to call it the way you see it, he's a good, very good head coach. He's going to let the OC, I guess, grow into that role. Basically, hey, I'm going to give you a little bit of wiggle room here.
Certainly. I mean, I think with Jonathan Gannon, you saw situations in the previous 2 years when he was the defensive coordinator where if he needed to fix something,
Yeah.
Sirianni, he'll adjust it. He'll admit to what happened. So I'm certain, he let the media know that he wasn't happy with Swift's touches and with his 18 plays. I'm certain he let Brian Johnson know that. And like we said, that'll definitely change. But I think it's just a situation about figuring things out, having a good run pass balance, but understanding they're going to pass more than they run.
And talking about the passing attack and the passing game, again, little surprise, Goddard was pretty much MIA. Now, I don't know if that was design. I don't know if it's the flow of the game. You always hear after the fact, the flow of the offense, how we're running the plays, if it's there, if it's not, but he's a big target across the middle of the seam routes. They need to get him involved going forward. Jalen Hurts, there's been a lot of talk when you rest starters during the preseason. My whole mindset, Glenn, and you tell me if you agree or not, is
Okay.
if you're going to rest these guys and scrape the preseason and just go to an 18 game schedule, right? Because again, we know teams and players are going to be rusty, but we're not going to overreact. But was not the best game from Jalen Hurts, right? I mean, especially what we saw coming off that Super Bowl performance, where if they would have won that game, you pretty much make a very strong case. He's the MVP.
Correct.
Brilliant performance. But how about your takeaways from Jalen Hurts week one?
I mean, he was okay. I mean, you still have to, like, again, adding the weather, and like
Yep.
you said, even if you scrap the preseason and you go to 18 games, that first game's still probably going to be a clunker for some guys. So it's about finding your rhythm. He was efficient. He made good throws. Did he miss a few throws? Certainly, but like you said, short of the 3 total joint practice sessions, that
Right.
was about the only work he got. So in terms of Goddard, I think you have to remember last season, Devontae Smith went without a catch in
Yep.
his first game, made that back up in the second and the third game. So things to work themselves out. Bill Belichick's not necessarily going to let some tight end just run roughshod over his unit. So I think that was more about game plan as well, while allowing his corners. He's got a rookie corner that's really good. So you can allow your corners to kind of play one-on-one. That's what he did. And it worked out from that standpoint of limiting the Eagles. So I think, Thursday night would be a better indicator, but I think things will improve from week to week.
No Gainwell ribs. Bradbury, it was tough for him to pass concussion protocol in a short week, ruled out. How about Blankenship with the ribs, in or out?
He'll be out as well.
So are we going to see more Sidney Brown?
I hope so. I mean, I'm certain Terrell Edmonds will get the start, but I think you hope to ramp up Brown's snaps, and I think Thursday night would be a good way to get him 20 to 30 in terms of relief standpoint. But I think from a starter's perspective, you'll see Terrell Edmonds and Justin Evans start at safety.
Fletcher Cox dealing with the ribs. I mean, listen, if you're only going to use him on third down here and there, when they needed him to make a couple plays, he blew up some plays in the backfield, and those were series altering plays, obviously. He should be good to go.
Yeah, he'll be good to go as well. So I think you'll have Dean, who's already out, and then you'll have Bradbury, who probably won't make it with the concussion, Blankenship, and Gainwell as well.
So Jalen Carter, I mean, you get a player, a steal in the draft, man, just sitting there. And I know we spoke leading up to the draft. A lot of people believe that he was the best overall player in that draft. It's scary for the opposition when you start to see a player make an impact right away.
Correct.
How about your thoughts on his debut?
I mean, it's what we expected. I mean, you have to remember even last year when you had Devontae Wyatt,
Yep.
Jordan Davis, and other guys come out, he was probably still the best player on that defense. So it's what you expect. I think organizations and the people in the organizations kind of make things work. So he landed in the best spot possible, probably. So you have Fletcher Cox, you have Brandon Graham, you have veteran leadership, then you have 4 other Georgia teammates there, to kind of make things simple for him. So I think he's going to be a star. He doesn't necessarily have to be a starter, or he doesn't necessarily have to be a star from day one, but just based off of his ability, his athletic ability, he can line up on the edge. He can line up in any of the techniques as a defensive tackle, as a nose. He's just a monster and a game wrecker from that standpoint.
Glenn Erby, kind enough to join us on a Wednesday edition of BYP with Q. Rich Quinones here. He covers the Eagles and the Ravens. Eagles Wire, Ravens Wire. All right, so Thursday night, quick turnaround. You get Minnesota. We know about Captain Kirk. We know about him in prime time. I mean, eventually he's got to win a game or two at
Correct.
night, if you will. I mean, eventually, right? But Minnesota's got some weapons, and you're starting to see some cracks in the armor, right? We saw it a little bit with Buffalo and Diggs and Allen, and maybe now with Jefferson and Cousins coming off the loss against Tampa Bay to start the season. Not their best effort, but again, they still have playmakers. Even if you look at this line being 4.5, 5, Eagles home opener, we know the Eagles are the better team. We know the Eagles gel in prime time. We know about the issues with the Minnesota Vikings, but I guess you can say on a nervous scale, I think this is an early season test for the Eagles because this is still a team that won 13 games last year in Minnesota.
Correct. I mean, I think it's a situation where you take it week by week. That the goal is to ultimately get. Would you like to win 14 games again? Certainly. But the idea is to continue to get better each week. So I think you have a situation where you can be a bit nervous. Your team is banged up. You have a Vikings team that's not coming into this game undefeated. It's not some high profile showdown. They lost in week 1, so they'll already be motivated. You have Justin Jefferson talking
Yep.
about tension, and he's motivated from the perceived, Darius Slay shutting him down last season. So that there'll be things to watch. Cousins struggles at night, but he had a clunker in the first game. He usually bounces back. So all
Yeah.
those things are different storylines that we'll be paying attention to.
Yeah. And Minnesota comes in banged up as well. It's amazing how many teams early on in the season. I mean, the Jets is a whole different animal with Rodgers going down 4 snaps in. But I looked at the Giants injury report. I mean, hamstring, hamstring, hamstring. We got the Eagles, concussion, ribs, ribs. I mean, it is a war of attrition at the NFL. When you look at this Eagles team, and again, it's so early. The NFL is week to week. That's why I never get caught up in power rankings, because you're going to stub your toe during the course of an NFL season. It's a given. And you're going to have a couple games where you have no business winning that you do, and a couple games where you have no business losing that you win. I'm sorry, that you lose. NFC East, it's recency bias, right? We'll look at Washington, new look, Washington Commanders. They get the win over Arizona. If they lost, I think it's more of an indictment on them than Arizona being good. The Giants, that series, opening series of the game, offensively, flipped the script, set the tone for that game. Dallas blows them out. Dallas, the hype after a week. Dallas has the Jets now. You look at the Eagles with Minnesota. I guess it's more of a statement / question you, but I still believe that the Philadelphia Eagles, pound for pound, up and down that roster, are probably 2, 3, 4 of the most talented teams in the NFL. And I still think they're the class of the NFC East. And I would even argue that they're 1 and 2, say, in the NFC with San Francisco. But what are your expectations of this team going forward throughout the whole NFL season in its entirety? Do you see them winning 12, 13 games? Do you see them running away with the NFC East? Do you believe the East is going to give them a little more resistance?
For sure, for sure. I mean, I think that the culture is the culture. So you have a standard. I think they'll quietly go about their business. I think they're okay with the Cowboys, the 49ers, other teams getting week 1 hype, getting week 2 hype. That's okay. It's a 17 game season.
Yeah.
It's a marathon. No team has repeated as the champion of the NFC East, so it's not a given that they'll repeat. The idea is to get into the playoffs, to get into the show, and then figure things out from there. You definitely want home field advantage, but I think from a depth chart of 1 and 2, they're one of the better teams in the NFC. I think you just have a situation where you have a lot of guys who, because of age, because of different things, didn't play in the preseason. So week 1 was their preseason. You still have the best offensive line in football. You still have some of the best pass rushers in football. Yep. Even with Bradbury out, you still have the best cornerback duo in football, best wide receiver duo in football, top 5 tight end. So it's just about building that chemistry. It's a new chemistry, 2 new coordinators. Cam Jurgens, a new right guard. All those things have to go into account. So it's just about building the chemistry, but you have a continued culture. You have the culture of 5 guys from Georgia who are just national champions. So no one's necessarily worried about winning the Super Bowl in week 1 or 2. It's about building, sustaining, and being efficient from week to week for them.
Listen, it's all about depth. I don't care what anyone tells me. In the NFL, you got to be able to run the football in November, December, and you got to be able to get to the quarterback. But you can't do those things if, honestly, you don't have depth, right? Because your defense is going to set up your offense. It's just like in boxing, man. The jab, you work off it, it sets everything up. You go to the body, the head's going to fall. The Eagles, to me, on paper, when you look at their tackles, their linemen, even the linebackers, they have such great depth, man. So it's scary where you can just blend in or substitute or get this guy in third down in situation. I mean, the key for me for the Eagles to sustaining the success we've seen, bridging it from last year, is what do they do best, right? They turn the football over, sure. They get to the quarterback, and they also pin their ears back with offenses. And what I mean is, defensively, they're not going to give up too much, right? If I can pick up 3, 4, 5 yards on first down and make second and third manageable, they love getting teams in 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10. The conversion rate on third down, you don't really convert a lot against Philadelphia Eagles. If they do those things, I just can't see why they wouldn't make that deep march again into the playoffs and perhaps the Super Bowl.
I mean, I think you're correct. Even with Sunday's performance, they still jumped out to a 16-0 lead. So they're going to jump out and get leads on teams. When they jump out and get the leads on teams, like you say, that's when they start to swarm, rotate their pass rushers, and come at you in waves. So you can't really get caught up in the theatrics of the point. They went into Foxborough, the Gillette Stadium, in the rain on a day where Tom Brady was honored and beat a pretty good team that was motivated to play. So you can't really compare apples to oranges. Cowboys beating the Giants team that maybe wasn't ready, maybe didn't have it. I mean, there are different things that go into play. So it's a week to week thing, and the hierarchy will change. Those teams, the Cowboys and the Eagles, will both play. They'll meet, they'll play the 49ers. So it'll all play itself out.
All right, let's transition quick to the Ravens. And I had, prior to the season, when I made my predictions, I think three teams potentially. Well, I did pick three teams. I shouldn't say potentially are coming out of the AFC North. Now, the Steelers made me look bad. They just got dominated by San Francisco. And quite frankly, I was shocked at how bad Cincinnati's offense looked against Cleveland. Maybe I underrated Cleveland in that defense and Watson in the offense. But it seems as though the Ravens are a heavy favorite, not only to win the AFC North, but to come out of the AFC. Now, think about this. You saw Buffalo struggle. You saw Cincinnati struggle. You saw Kansas City lose to a very good Detroit team. Let's not underscore that fact. And then the Jets just lost Aaron Rodgers, right? So
Right.
if you're a Ravens fan, you're thinking to yourself, after 1 week, not bad. Things might start to open up. Where are you right now with the Baltimore Ravens?
I mean, I agree. I think the AFC they get the hype. They have the hype because of the star power at the quarterback position. But in
Yeah.
terms of teams, every team has its flaws. You know, the Chiefs have a flaw, the Bills have a flaw. You know, every AFC team has a flaw. But I think the one thing you could stand with the Ravens is they're going to be consistent in the running game. They have a motivated Lamar Jackson, even with him getting paid. His motivation is to now show people that he's one of the best quarterbacks in the game. You have Zay Flowers, who's really talented, and
Yep.
his week one explosion allows Odell Beckham to just play a role. I don't necessarily think you wanted Odell Beckham to have to be a 1,300-yard guy, and with Flowers being able to play that well, he doesn't have to. So I think as long as the defense can be solid, Jadeveon Clowney played motivated in game one. The stat line didn't show, but I think he had like 4 or 5 pressures and a couple of quarterback hits. So if they can get pressure on the quarterback, get good cornerback play, they're certainly under the radar or dark horse candidate to be in the Super Bowl, definitely.
Yeah, and listen, I thought it was easy pickings because you're going against a rookie quarterback to start the season when you took on Houston. But you look at their schedule, here's a nice little early season litmus test because you have to imagine Cincinnati is thinking to themselves, there's no way our offense is this bad after
Right.
1 week. And maybe they figure it out and they can run the ball a little better. But even if Baltimore wins that game on the road, another rookie quarterback, right? Richardson in Indianapolis. They
Right.
come back Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Tennessee, which I think is just spit to bit. You can make a case that this team could potentially be 5-6-0 before they take on the Lions in late October.
They're kind of like the Eagles from last year in the terms of they're maybe next year is the year, but
Yeah.
they could be a year away. But like you said, because of situations going on with other teams and the nice schedule, you look up, they're 6-7-0, 6-1, 7-1. Next thing you know, they get home field advantage. Next thing you know, they're in the AFC title game. Next thing you know, you look up in there in the Super Bowl. So similar situations to that. But I think in terms of being most sound, in terms of being the team that has their culture, together the most in terms of the Bills. We're not sure what's going on with Josh Allen. We're not sure if he's having a Carson Wentz moment. Every team has a flaw, but the Ravens are solid. They're physical and they have a motivated quarterback.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I get killed when I say this, but it's all about availability, man. I mean,
Correct.
he has to play 17 games unless they already locked in the top seed. You want to sit him however late with Harbaugh. I don't care, but he's got to be upright, man. The offensive line has to pass block. They have to run block. They have to give him protection and times. I feel as though there are certain quarterbacks in the NFL that the first instinct is, let me tuck the ball in. I mean, look at the Giants the other night. That first series, that was Daniel Jones basically deciding, I got to take off and run.
Correct.
Lamar Jackson, we've seen that, but then we've also seen sometimes where he tries to do a little too much. That Giant game last year, bad snap, picks it up, broken play, rolling out, throws across the body. MVP caliber quarterbacks don't do that, right? So if he's healthy, he's probably going to have an all-pro type of year, man. And we'll probably start discussing by maybe December the MVP race, Mahomes, Jackson, maybe Hurts, but he's got to play a full season. He has to.
Certainly, I think that's the key. I think that's his goal. He bulked up a little bit. I think it's on, the new offensive coordinator, Todd Monken, and so far he's done a good job of putting him in positions to not get hurt. I mean, he did lead the team in rushing, but I
Yep.
think they were, again, comparing to Jalen Hurts, they were well-timed runs. They weren't dangerous runs. So I think for him, it's just about, being efficient, which he was in that first game, being accurate, making sound decisions, and not putting himself in a situation where he can get hurt, but also with the offensive coordinator and the offensive system, putting him in a position where he can get rid of the ball, quick bubble screens, quick outs, things like that, while relying on Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers, and the other weapons he has around him.
He's only played 16 games complete season his rookie year, obviously now with the 17. I feel people want him to turn around and put up the type of numbers he did in 2019, 36 touchdowns, 9 picks, big yardage, ran for a ton as well. Do you sense that offensively they they want him to allow the play to develop and then run, the running would be that secondary thought, if that makes sense. If it's not there, take what's given to you, but also live to fight another down.
Correct. And I mean, I think that's something he can do, and he's gotten better. He's gotten better at that this summer, and I think that's a goal for him. So I think in the first game, it was important for him to be efficient. It was important for him to make throws from the pocket, and I think that's the goal going forward. I think, you'll see him be even more efficient with Mark Andrews coming back. I think they only targeted the tight end once in that first game. So Mark Andrews coming back, you hope to get Isaiah Likely to have a better effort. Patrick Ricard as a fullback, H back. They have weapons in the offense. Gus Edwards, Keaton Mitchell will be back. He has weapons, and it'll be on Monken to just, like he did at Georgia, utilize the weapons, utilize the athletic tight ends, utilize the guys on the outside, and just allow, Jackson to make calls at the line of scrimmage while being efficient and accurate as a quarterback.
And really good point on Beckham. It's almost like, he's, I don't want to say past the prime. He can still be a very good wide receiver, but it's almost when we've seen Deshaun Jackson kind of go from team to team, you don't need 1,000 yards. Give me
Right.
750 to 800. Give me that third down conversion. Give me a couple touchdowns late, maybe in the playoffs, or we saw what he was able to do uh, 2 Super Bowls ago before he went down with the injury. And again, you could have said he was the MVP. Lastly, before I let you get out of here, man, you watch that game on Monday night, and I got hammered because 6, 7 months ago on BYP, I said that the Jets should pursue Lamar Jackson, and it's going to end badly with Rodgers. Now, I wasn't insinuating an injury. I just thought maybe he gets nicked up. Maybe they go 8-9, 9-8. He has a couple bad games down the stretch. But how about the buildup, right? For 6, 7, 8 months and everything. And then for him to be lost, tear the ACL, which you knew right away, let's be honest, 4 snaps in, that's got to just be a punch gut to a franchise that is pretty much snake bit. I mean, how do you respond to that? I don't believe Zach Wilson's the answer, but I think they have to figure out a way to rally around him and have their defense carry them and have their ground attack help them out and bail out the defense at times. But man, I'm watching that. I'm like, this is bad, man. This is not good for the NFL, and this is horrible for the Jets. And if you're a fan of the Jets, it's not good.
I mean, it was disappointing, but I think that's on Joe Douglas and those guys. I think when you get him or you start to plan to get him at that point, I think it's less about bringing in his favorite wide receivers and addressing your tackle positions. And even though you moved Mekhi Becton to
Yeah.
right tackle, I don't know if you could have got back Bakhtiari from the Packers, but with that extra money, once he, restructured his deal, at some point you're going to have to find a viable left tackle, and even if he comes back next year or just going forward, that's something you have to address. But I mean, it was disappointing, but you saw glimpses of it in Hard Knocks, and even that night, on all 4 dropbacks, he was hit on all 4 plays.
The
So
line, man.
right, so
And,
that's
and
something
he
else.
not to cut you off, Glenn. He apparently he had an issue with some of those plays that were put in there. I mean, the Athletic, I think, is reporting he wasn't happy with some of the play calls. But again, not to be nitpicky, you got to throw the ball away. You have
You,
to.
you do, but I think the left tackle. You could say all you want about it being a 3-step drop, but
Right.
he barely got the linebackers hands down if all, and the linebacker, he didn't knock the linebacker down, so that cut block was away. So regardless of what you're talking about in terms of Rodgers should have gotten the ball out, I don't see the need to cut at that point. I mean, you'd rather have the ball get knocked down than your quarterback get knocked out the game
Good point.
with that type of unit.
Yeah, it's man, it's
Becton didn't cut on the play, so even if both
that's
tackles
true.
were supposed to, Becton didn't.
Yeah, it just man, you're watching. I'm like the rain's coming down. And by the way, I didn't hear a lot of people talking about this. That calf injury, perhaps a precursor, right? He's just not a 25-year-old quarterback. He's 38, 39. He's been nicked
Correct.
up and you're putting all your eggs in that bag. And it's funny because now all of a sudden, who are you going to go out? You're going to go get that veteran. You got X, Y, and Z that's out there. And I mean, I don't know. Foles, Wentz, you're going to try to get Ryan out of Booth. I mean, Brady's not walking through that door. Joe Namath's not walking through that door. I mean, if they win 7, 8 games, that with Wilson and no Rodgers, that's a hell of a coaching job by Robert Saleh.
I think that's the goal. I mean, I love Carson Wentz. I can't see him coming off the street and helping lead the Jets to the playoffs. This is not 2019 Eagles. So from that standpoint, you let Wilson do it. You put him in a position like we were just talking about to be successful, but you
Yeah.
again use your running game, rely on that all-world defense, and depending on how things shake out, you get into the playoffs, and then who knows? But I think from the standpoint of a Super Bowl or making a Super Bowl run this year, that's not the case. At this point, you just want to continue to let those guys get better, address the tackle position in the offseason, and wait for Rodgers to come back.
Hey, and if any fan base can kind of relate, 1991, man, Green Bay and Eagles. Eagles were on the road against Green Bay. Cunningham got his knee, right? I think it was Bryce
Correct.
Pop, right? And
Yeah.
they went through 5 quarterbacks that year.
Correct.
5 quarterbacks. And then a couple years later, 94, I think he tore up his knee as well. So, um, I, man, it's just brutal. It was like a buildup and,
It was
his highlight.
extreme.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was extremely disappointing. I mean, I think I went 10 days without ESPN because I have Spectrum. So the idea of getting it back that night because of
right.
him coming, and then you 4 games in, he gets knocked down, and it's just disappointing as hell. But they're a good
Football.
team. Right. Hopefully they can make some run. Hopefully they can make a run, get to the playoffs, get everybody some more experience. But I think I wouldn't talk Super Bowl till
No.
next year. And that's spend this offseason upgrading your tackles or using every draft pick on,
Yeah.
offensive tackles.
Yeah, 100%. And by the way, 31 other teams, they might feel bad to a man, but hey, man, it's football. You got to
For
roll with
sure.
it. You're not,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, Buffalo's got their own issues, obviously, with their quarterback who just his decision making. How can you be that talented and just make the most porous? And I killed Diggs, but maybe there's something to be said with the diva wide receiver kind of eyeballing up the quarterback now because he's getting frustrated. I mean, you talk about a window closing on a team. It could be Cincinnati and can certainly be Buffalo after what we saw the other night with Allen.
It can, and I think that's on the coaching staff and the head coach. I mean, you can Diggs is a really good wide receiver, but Davis is pretty good. And if it's not going to work, you can always trade him and get something back for him. But you don't want to be that quarterback that every time you throw a drop off or you throw the ball to another guy, you have to look because you hear or you see him, in your ear. I mean, you have to spread the ball around. You have to get other guys involved. That's just football, period. I mean,
Yeah.
he's not going to have 166 catches. So,
Right.
what can we do?
Right. Right. Unless he's playing in Miami.
Sure, and even those two guys get the ball. So again, that's about McDaniels putting him in a
That's right.
situation where he can throw the
That's right.
ball and puff the ball around like that.
Yeah. Drama after only 1 week in the NFL.
It's the best business in town.
No doubt, no doubt. Glenn Erby at the cover two, NFL managing editor of the Eagles Wire. Give him a follow, give them a follow. The Ravens Wire as well for USA Today. And also, you still got the pod going?
I am. I'm waiting on a new mic, but I'm trying to get things started, get it ramped back up sometime this week. Definitely hope to get you on.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, man, I always appreciate it. I look forward to getting you on every week. Thanks for jumping on a Wednesday edition of BYP. Great insight as always, brother. Appreciate you.
Saying appreciate you, Rich.